Did Trump just throw Putin a lifeline? Because while the world was focused on the Strait of Hormuz blowing up oil prices, Washington quietly eased pressure on Russian oil. Not forever, not completely, but enough to matter. And if Russia is burning through men, money, and material in Ukraine, then even temporary relief at the right moment can be a big deal. So the real question is not whether Trump fully has rescued Russia. He didn't. The real question is whether he gave the Kremlin breathing room at the exact point it needed it the most. Firstly, let's get the facts straight. This was not a full repeal of sanctions on Russian oil. The Trump administration issued temporary rate waivers for Russian crude and petroleum products that were already loaded on ships. The first one came on March 12th, 2026, then it was adjusted March 19th, and then extended again on April 17th. So this was not America saying, we are back to normal with Russian oil. It was more like, we need more barrels moving because the global oil market is under stress. That matters because people hear sanctions lifted and imagine a total reversal. This was much more narrower than that. The big backdrop here is the Strait of Hormuz. That route handles a huge chunk of global oil and gas flows. When it's disrupted, prices move fast. And in April, the US Energy Information Administration said the Hormuz closure and related outages were key drivers in its latest forecast, with major production shut-ins across Gulf exporters and Brent expected to spike. So the Trump administration was dealing with a real energy shock, and that is the defense. The logic was simple. If Middle Eastern supply is getting squeezed, you do not want Russian barrels stuck at C2. Because then the prices will go even higher. So the short-term market stability point of view, you can see the argument. But geopolitics does not care about clean excuses. If Russian oil gets to market during an oil spike, Russia benefits. That's just the cold, hard reality. And that is the key point. Even if the waiver was temporary, even if it only applied to oil already on the water, even if the White House says it was just about calming markets, Russia still gets something valuable out of it. Cash flow and timing matters in war, and so do price levels. If you let Russian barrels clear the system while global oil prices are elevated, you help Moscow monetize supply in a stronger pricing environment. That does not mean Trump funded the war directly, but it does mean the pressure was loosened. And when Russia's war machine still depends heavily on energy revenue, any easing matters more than people want to admit, especially at a time when Russia has been grinding through huge amounts of resources in Ukraine. Now, Russia is not fighting this war for free. It is expensive. Its economy has been wrapped around the war effort. Its military spending has been huge. Experts have said Russia's planned military expenditure for 2026 was about 6.3% of GDP, even before any likely adjustments, and higher oil prices make that burden easier to carry. And that is the part people miss. Russia does not need perfect economic conditions, it just needs enough revenue to keep the machine fed. Enough for shells, enough for recruitment, enough for drones, enough for payroll, enough to keep the war going. So if you combine higher global oil prices with even temporary sanctions relief, the Kremlin gets exactly what it wants most: more room to keep fighting. Now, to be fair, we should not turn this into a fantasy either. This was not a magic solution for Russia. It was not a total sanctions collapse, and by late April, Bessent said the US would not renew the waiver again. So the move looks more like an emergency pressure valve than a grand pro-Russia reset. Also, Russia's finances were under strain before the Middle East crisis boosted oil. Its budget deficit was already a problem, its war costs were already piling up, and its economy was under severe pressure. So, the honest take is this: the waiver probably did not transform the war, but it may have softened the squeeze at a very useful moment for Moscow, and sometimes in war, that is enough to matter. And maybe the biggest problem is not just money. It is the signal, because sanctions are supposed to communicate resolve. They are supposed to tell the other side you do not get relief while you're still waging war. So when Washington blinks because energy markets get ugly, the message changes. It tells Moscow the global pain can weaken Western discipline. It tells the market that Russian barrels are still too important to fully isolate. And it tells everyone watching that sanctions are not just moral tools, they are political tools, which means they bend when the cost gets high enough. And that is a dangerous lesson, not just for Russia, but indeed for everyone. So did Trump throw Russia a lifeline? Not a permanent one, not a full one, but a temporary one. Yes, you can absolutely argue that, because if you ease pressure on Russian oil during a global supply shock, you are helping Moscow breathe. And when Russia is deep into a resource-heavy war in Ukraine, breathing room is not trivial. It can be the difference between strain and endurance.